Hi, Krishna, and welcome to this series on desires and the rewiring power of the divine symbols on the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani. We often think karma is about action, but karma actually begins much earlier than action. Karma begins in attention. It begins in desire. It begins in what the mind keeps returning to. In the words of Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, he speaks about the power of contemplation. Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsa. So while contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment. It's Bhagavad Gita, second chapter. So the mind goes where attachment pulls it. And where the mind goes repeatedly, energy flows. Where energy flows, habits are forming. And when habits are forming, our identity becomes stronger and it hardens. And when identity is becoming strong, then karma becomes more and more deep. So, in this sense, our entanglement does not begin only when we do something outwardly wrong. It begins when our consciousness becomes repeatedly absorbed in the temporary, the anxious, the sensual, the controlling, the flattering, the resentful, the expectations. And as Bhagavad Gita says, desire leads to anger, delusion, bewilderment, and eventually the ruin of discrimination. So, spiritual life is not merely moral correction. It's not just stop doing the wrong things. It's actually re education of our consciousness. It's actually a rewiring process. In Srimad Bhagavatam, there's the concept that bondage and liberation both depend on where the mind is attached. Just like the worm looking at the bee becomes very scared and eventually it becomes the bee. So Bhagavatam is speaking about the mind becomes the cause of bondage and the cause of liberation. So that's in the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. If the mind is absorbed in, say, matter, it binds us. If it's absorbed in the divine, if it's absorbed in thinking of Shri Radha and Krishna, then the mind becomes free. That's why divine symbols matter. If the material world conditions us through repeated impressions, samskaras, then spiritual life heals us through higher impressions. So the Bhagavatam repeatedly works through these sacred imagery, sacred sounds, sacred forms, sacred remembrances, because transformation is not only happening intellectually, but also subtly and emotionally, which is very important. The spiritual world is not abstract or empty. It is full of meaning, form, beauty, auspiciousness. That's what Vaikunta and Goloka, it's full of symbols, ornaments, gestures, colors, lotuses, conch shells, footprints, forests, rivers, cows, flutes, all kinds of poetic decorations. They carry spiritual consciousness. And in Gita, it is said, whatever state of being one remembers when he quits the body, that state one will attain without fail. The 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So eventually during life, what we repeatedly remember, it shapes what we become. So when the mind repeatedly contemplates sacred symbols, it learns a new language. Instead of fear, we learn shelter. Instead of the mentality of scarcity, it learns abundance. Instead of restlessness, it learns surrender. Instead of a self-centered craving, it learns relationships. Instead of chaos, it learns harmony. This is why remembrance is so central in Bhakti Yoga. Therefore, Krishna says, always think of me, 8th chapter. And Prahlad Maharaj also emphasizes, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Nasyam, Sakhyam, Atmanivedanam. So Prahlad Maharaj is emphasizing hearing, chanting, remembering, serving, worshipping. So these practices are not just mechanical rituals, they are ways of reshaping the inner landscape. A lotus is not just a flower. It teaches us purity in the midst of all this impurity we live among. Conch shell is not just an object, it signals awakening, an announcement. Sudarshan chakra is not merely a weapon, it represents divine order, cutting through the confusion and darkness. And the Lord's lotus feet are not merely poetic imagery, they represent refuge, humility, surrender, and a place where the wandering of the mind ends. So that's why Bhagavatam says the feet of the Lord are like the boat to cross the ocean of material existence. In the 10th canto, there's this beautiful description, so many imagery of Srimad Bhagavatam literature that helps us to cure the disease of the mind, Bhava Roga. And devotees can again and again and again meditate on the marks on the lotus feet of the Lord, because the sacred symbols, they reorganize our consciousness, they rewire our consciousness. The mind is always being programmed by symbols, whether we realize it or not. The question is not whether symbolism affects us. The question is which symbols are shaping us. Material symbols usually stimulate consumption, comparison, ego, performance, envy, insecurity, whereas spiritual symbolism, they turn our subconscious mind towards the eternal symbols, awaken the remembrance of the lotus feet of the Lord, the form of the Lord. And Srila Rupa Goswami explains that bhakti begins by engaging the senses in relation to Krishna. The mind, the eyes, the voice, the habits, the hand, everything becomes gradually spiritualized. And the Bhagavatam is also speaking about how by Shravanam and Kirtanam, by hearing and chanting about the Lord, about the symbols on the lotus feet of the Lord, can cleanse our desires in different layers. All these desire for material enjoyment will be cleansed from our hearts. So when we surround ourselves with sacred sound, sacred form, sacred meditations, we're not engaging in sentimentality. We are participating in subtle purification. We are entering into that spiritual realm of divine symbolism. So we can take this mind and travel. So we can take this mind, give this mind a new groves to travel into. And slowly, what once attracted us will begin to lose its taste. What once disturbs us will begin to loosen its grip. What once maybe defined us, all the material shackles, will dissolve. So these symbolisms are extremely important. From desire for control to desire for service. That's what happens when we meditate on the symbols in the lotus feet of the Lord. From desire for stimulation to desire of remembrance of spiritual world. From desire of possession to desire of devotion. So this is real rewiring, real transformation. Then Krishna also speaks about this in Bhagavad Gita, that only by accumulating higher taste, we can give up lower engagements in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So that is the secret. We do not overcome karma by merely suppression. We overcome karma by higher absorption. So yes, karma binds, desire entangles. The mind can become trapped in repeated mundane focus. But the grace of the Lord, this is a bridge, the symbols of the lotus feet, the sounds, the names, the form, leelas, and their sacred meanings. All these things will uplift our consciousness so we can remember our original direction. Then when we allow these symbols, which are alive, to deeply enter our heart, our consciousness, then immediately the reorganizing, the rewiring happens. That's how karma loosens. That's how the heart becomes auspicious. This is how the mind becomes spiritually intelligent. And that's how the soul begins to walk back to freedom. So let's enter into this journey of discovering the meanings on the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani, specifically in this series. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Look forward in the next video. Hare Krishna.